Welcome to a Tech Moment on Cannabis Tech. I'm your host, Christina Etter. In this podcast, we take just a few minutes to talk about some of the exciting science and technology that is driving and changing the cannabis and hemp industries. And today, I'm kind of continuing this theme that we have going on this month and reaching out to some of the women in cannabis that are really making a difference. You know, with International Women's Week and Women's History Month in the month of March, it just seems like the right time to do this. And so I'm thrilled to have my guest today, Kim Kovacs, who is from Arcview, on the show. And you know, one of the things that I love the most about the cannabis industry is the support that I get from the other women that are in the cannabis industry. It really has been an incredible experience for me. And I can tell you, I don't think that anyone exemplifies that more than Kim Kovacs from Arcview, and the work that she is doing to help advocate and encourage other women in the industry. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thank you so much, Christina. What a pleasure to be here. And Women's History Month. So this is our chance to actually make history this month and not just celebrate what's already been happening, in our struggles and our journeys to get here. So looking forward to this podcast today.
Absolutely, and I'm just so excited to talk about some of the things that you're doing to help encourage other women. I'll tell you, I spent 20 years in the corporate world working in a male-dominated information technology sector, and it's been absolutely refreshing for me to kind of start over here in the cannabis industry, and as a woman, a professional woman in the industry, it's just been an absolutely phenomenal experience for me. So I'm really kind of hoping through this podcast that we get to talk about some of those fun things and encourage other women, to really to have an open mind about the cannabis and hemp industries and joining this ever-growing phenomenon that's happening right now in this industry. But so before we get started into all of these wonderful and great things that are happening for women in the cannabis and hemp space, let's learn a little bit more about you. So can you give me a little bit of your background and kind of what led you down this path to join in with the cannabis industry?
Absolutely. It's a little bit convoluted. I'll give you that. So I started out actually in my career working for Deloitte. So I was at Deloitte for a couple of years. I was in executive consulting and working with, startup companies. And I have to say, I kind of caught the bug. And I was working with some entrepreneurs and building their businesses and really helping them get to that next level. And I said, you know what, this is the place for me. And so I, gave my notice at Deloitte. I joined a startup company, and I haven't looked back since. And it has just been, sort of my life's journey is really working as an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur, raising money. And then the flip side of that is I always and forever will be an investor. And to me, they kind of go sort of hand in hand. If you're going to start a company, the first investor is yourself. You have to convince yourself that this is a good endeavor, right? You're putting your time and your money and probably your family's money, your savings, all of this, you're all in. And so if you can't convince yourself that this is the best thing that you should be doing, you're not going to convince anybody else. And so I've always had that mindset, as an entrepreneur. And so I had just the honor of working with a lot of great co-founders. I've had 6 startups. I've had exits. Some were good, some not so good. And when I sold one of my last companies, which is a software company, so like you, I was in fintech, and I was in technology, I was in life sciences, I was in clean technologies, and sold a company. And then I joined a couple of angel groups, and one of which was really important for me. It was called Golden Seeds. And Golden Seeds is a group of investors. They're mostly women, about 300 of them. There are chapters across the country. They hail from New York, and they came out of Wall Street. And in 2006, they decided, to take a hard look at this, the dynamic, right, of funding. And they were absolutely shocked, like we all were and still are, the lack of capital going to women-run businesses. And so Golden Seeds was founded under the premise that we would invest only in majority owned and operated by women. And that's what we've done. So for the last 14, 15 years now, we've really moved the needle in how many women are angel investors plus how many women are getting angel capital. And so I ran that group for Southern California for 4 years. And but I have to say I miss being an entrepreneur. And so I jumped back in. And as I was thinking about my next, startup move and different things, I got introduced to cannabis in the weirdest way. My mother-in-law, my ex-mother-in-law actually, She was an opioid addict. And so she was taking opioids to manage pain. She had had a couple cancer surgeries. I always say she's a cancer survivor. Is that really surviving, right? When you're so dependent on these drugs. I mean, it was terrible. And it was just, I mean, I felt bad for her, but I didn't know what else, she could do. And she came clean to myself and my fiance that she was going off of opioids and taking cannabis. And I'm like, what? How does that work? And I was just, and having that sort of inquisitive entrepreneurial mind, I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that cannabis could do that. And so I started learning and I started understanding. I started investing in the space. I joined Arcview as a member. I started a company in the cannabis space called MyJane, which was to promote, it was a tech platform actually that matched products with women and gave them a really safe space to, try different cannabis products, sold that company. And then I joined Arcview as their CEO in January of 2020. And for me, this is like the culmination of everything I've always wanted to do. Being an entrepreneur, being an investor, promoting women, diversity and inclusion, working in a frontier technology that has so many different aspects to it. I mean, if you want tech, you got it. If you want to be in ag, you've got it, right? If you want to be in brands and products, cannabis is the place for you. And so why not spend my time here?
Right. Right. And I love hearing that story. It actually hits really close to home to me. My husband, on March 18th this year, will celebrate 5 years opiate free thanks to cannabis. So it's been an excellent journey for us as well. And I totally get what your mother-in-law went through. And it's just so refreshing to hear those stories and hear the kind of inspiration that it garners, because I really think that it's these personal impact stories that are really kind of like with you and with me, it's what drew us into this industry, is learning about all of the amazing things that this plant can do. And I love to hear women share those stories, because I really do feel like they're super impactful and really kind of drive home that point that there's multiple aspects to cannabis. Yes, there's the recreational use of cannabis, but there's also a side to cannabis that is saving lives. And I think that's what makes this industry so very much fun.
Well, and also, I think when I started looking at this industry, and I feel like I'm now a veteran, but I literally started in 2017. So it hasn't even been that long, right? But I think one of the most important things that I've noticed in my cannabis journey is really starting to understand, like I said, and you said, right, all these aspects of the industry and different ways in which you can play or get in or do tech. You don't have to touch the plant, but it's allowing for people from other industries to come in to this emerging cannabis market. I wouldn't even say we're not even there yet. I mean, we're not even federally legal. We're still battling, winning state by state and city by city. And so we have a long way to go, but I feel like we are at this sort of tipping point, turning point, where a lot of professionals, are coming into this space, and it's not this little, ha-ha, giggle, I'm in cannabis. Oh, no, I'm in cannabis, and you better believe this is a big industry. And the respect level that I have now, saying I'm an investor in cannabis and I'm running, an investor network in cannabis, is hands down amazing. I could have never had a seat at the table a couple years ago like I do now.
Right. And, let's talk about all that, because that's one of the things that I wanted to get into is you're really kind of shattering the glass ceiling all the way around. Not only are you the CEO for Arcview, but you're actually involved in multiple companies, right? And at a director kind of level. So how do you manage all that and then still manage to have a personal life too?
Well, I always look at sort of everything in sort of, I don't do day by day, I do sort of week by week, Some people do month by month or year by year, and I used to do year by year, and then I realized I was missing out on a lot of things. So I kind of do more week by week, and I look at my week and I say, some days are going to be really packed with certain things, and some days I get a chance to take off a bit early, and I play beach volleyball. I live in Laguna Beach, so I really enjoy being outside a lot. And so for me, that's important because it grounds me, and it actually gives me more energy to do the things I need to, and I show up better, right? When I'm re-energized, from just being outside for a bit or going down to the beach with my dog or something like that. So I look at myself sort of week by week, and I really kind of plan out my week at the beginning and just say, okay, so these days are going to be more work focused. These are going to be my afternoons. I get to, futz around a little bit, and then I get back to certain things. So that's the balance that I have, and that works for me in my personal life and my business. But yeah, we got a lot going on at Arcview. I mean, when I started, Arcview was a great events place. I mean, it was a place for, investors to get together, companies to get together. We had 5-6 events a year, right? I started in January 2020. I went to one Arcview event, and then COVID hit. And then all of a sudden we had to really decide, who is Arcview? What are we giving back to the community? How are we engaging the community, right? So things like this and doing things virtually and having digital programs and really having a new way to interact with the industry was important. And so we stood up a venture group. So we have the ability to now, offer different types of capital to different companies, not just angel investing, but venture investing. We have a broker dealer that we started last year. So we can do bigger deals, M&A, buy, sell, going public. I mean, all the things that are really important for cannabis investors. And then we also launched a consulting company last year. And so, we're able to now really help companies along this continuum. And so you're talking about glass ceiling. So I'm actually the chairwoman, we'll drop the gender identity at the end of it. I am the chair of a broker dealer in the cannabis space. So I'm the only woman in that position in the world. Right? And it just sort of happened that way, but it was like, wow, that's actually pretty cool, that I can help, forge that next new ground. And hopefully there's maybe one, investment banker female listening, but, these are the kinds of things that, my mom and that generation did for me to get into finance to begin with, right? So if we can start opening these doors and saying, hey, this is normal, women should be in these positions, go for it.
Right. Absolutely. And that's, that's something too that you really don't think about much is women investors and women getting involved in these companies from that perspective. I really think that as an emerging industry, the cannabis space has that opportunity for people. Now, in addition to that, I mentioned at the beginning that one of the things that really impresses me about the cannabis industry is the way that people are just so willing to collaborate. It seems like everybody understands that this is a young industry and that we all kind of have to work together and collaborate to kind of help everybody do better and succeed. And I'm sure that's what you had in mind when you formed the Women's Inclusion Network. So do you want to talk a little bit about that group and kind of what your background is with that group and why you went into forming it?
It's my favorite part of Arcview, I'll just be honest. Because to me, the Women's Investor Network actually was founded as sort of a subgroup of Arcview years ago. And as a member of Arcview, I used to go to the luncheons, and it was great. And there was originally 25 women, then there were 50 women, and then there were close to 100 women, that would come to these luncheons. And we would all just sort of, share stories. What part of the industry are we in? Can we help each other? And it was such a warm, intro into the whole Arcview community, right? It was kind of our landing place, and it was a safe place for women to, be vulnerable and to help each other and to really unpack, where the opportunity zones were, especially for women a few years ago. And so when I came into Arcview, instead of it just being a luncheon as part of the event, it just seemed really important to make it a priority and to turn it from just being investor focused to being inclusive. And what I mean by that is that, if we keep those divisive words, right? Like it's only women, it's only this, or it's only that, then we're no better than it's been for the last hundreds of years, right? Only men. So to me, it's about working together, creating an environment that is a safe place for everyone, and that includes LGBTQ, anyway, the whole thing, right? BIPOC, and to me, so inclusion also means that we will have men in our Women's Inclusion Network, and that is so important because if we look at who's funded the cannabis industry to date, has been mostly older white men, And so we look at the cannabis industry and who has taken, the risks early. Yes, there are, original cannabis, operators, but there's also people who funded those businesses too. And I think, we need to give deference to all of the people that took those risks. And so to me, we shouldn't be bashing anyone, and we should be including all of them. And so that to me is just front and center for Arcview. And we carry that through on all of our, as much as we can, all of our programming and all of our content, and everything that we do is with this purpose of being inclusive.
That's great. No, I think that's absolutely wonderful. And you're right. We do need to start healing some of the divide that we have and start bringing people together and start learning that we can learn from each other no matter what our backgrounds are, no matter what our, anything that makes us different. It just doesn't matter. We can learn from everyone.
Right. And one thing I say, especially to women who are like raising money, I said, if you walk into a room with a preconceived bias, like if you think that you're going to walk into a room of all male investors and they're not going to invest in your company because you're a woman, I go, you've lost. Right? I said, so leave those emotions at the door, leave all that stuff behind, walk in with a clean slate, with an open mind, and I said, you might be surprised at how great that exchange is. And if you're really listening to somebody and they're giving you criticisms or they're talking about certain things, it's not you, it's not personal to Kim, but it's personal to the business that I'm presenting or the idea that I have. It isn't about me, it's about what I'm presenting. And so it's just a different way of thinking about it. So that's, again, what we're trying to do at Arcview is to have that different way of thinking about it and being inclusive as much as we can.
That's great. So now talk to me about this partnership with Women Empowered in Cannabis. This is another popular women's group that a lot of the people in the cannabis industry, a lot of the women in the cannabis industry are a part of. So I'd like to hear about more of the motivation behind partnering up with this group.
Yeah, so really just such a stellar group. Them, Women Grow. I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, pioneers, who have really, taken the first shots in this industry and have led the way for us to come in. But, we can't do this alone. I mean, anyone who thinks that they're going to start a company by themselves, fund it by themselves, grow it by themselves, you probably shouldn't be doing it. And to me, the more we can collaborate, the more that we can really find, I had a great partner. She's actually my best friend, Michelle Patterson, in my last business with My Jane. And she had a saying. She said, find your genius, right? And so we all have our genius. And if we then come together and you know yours and I know mine and everybody comes with theirs, then we have an opportunity to really collaborate and create something very special. And that's how I look at WEiC and the partnerships that we have and being able to say, this is our genius. This is what Arcview does really, really well. And this is what you guys do. And this is what you do really well. And then we come together and we really support each other.
That's fantastic. And it's great to hear about all of these opportunities for people just to get together and communicate. I think we've, between the keyboards and electronic communications and things like that, it's easy to quickly send off a 2-sentence email, but to actually sit down and have a meaningful, in-depth conversation with other people can really make a strong difference, I think, in the understanding between between those two parties. Now, you mentioned earlier how important it is to have that exchange with men in the industry and to be able to have that kind of communication. But talk to me a little bit about how very important it is for women to connect with other women.
Well, I'm a little bit older than you. When I started my career, back in the early 90s, there weren't a lot of women in professional positions. And so, a lot of the mentors that I had, a lot of the sponsors that I've had throughout my career have been men, just because it was really hard to find a woman in finance. It was hard to find a woman venture capitalist, right, that looked like me or could relate like I could. And even when I found mentors, they were typically a little bit older and they weren't working in sort of this current generation that I was in. And so it was really difficult to kind of, find that. And it wasn't until I was really kind of in my mid-40s that I started embracing, having women as mentors, because we now had more collective experiences together that we could really work from. And I would say that women working together is a different dynamic than women and men. And when a guy comes in a room, there's other things that happen. We have hormones, we have other things that go on. And I think there's this interesting dynamic with women. If we can put aside some of the judgments and various other things that also women tend to do, and really get to a place where we're here for the benefit of each other, and we can really then support each other. And so, like, one of the things that we've been really, I've been super proud of is sort of the mentorship things that we have going on at WIN, at the Women's Inclusion Network, where we match up women with other women in the industry, and or men too, depending on what they're looking for. So we really want to, again, find the best person for them, to collaborate with and work with. But I'm going to give you a contrarian view of that as well. So when I was at Golden Seeds, we had a lot of women-run companies, right? Women founders, women, funders, all these things. And we would get companies that would come in that were all women, 100%. I would never fund a company that has 100% women in it. And it was really an interesting debate because there were some women investors, part of my network and so forth, that they thought that was great. They loved that. They loved the idea of funding an all-women team. And I thought, again, how is that any better than what we've been fighting for the last couple hundred years, And it just, again, that's my personal, approach to it, which is, you've got the world. The world looks the way the world is. It's the UN. We've got all kinds of religions and different things going on, and you have to really look at everybody and just say, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here together, and being inclusive again. That's such a great word. I'm glad we changed that from investor. But so I would say women collaborating together is very powerful. I wouldn't exclude men from that collaboration, and I would embrace it.
Absolutely. And you're right. There's absolutely perspectives from, male perspectives that we need to take into consideration when you're running a business. You're not just catering to half the population. You want to cater to all of the population. So, you have to have those perspectives from all angles. And I completely agree with that. Now, we're kind of here on a cusp, I feel like, in the cannabis industry with changing legislation, changing views, and changing perspectives with the cannabis industry and hemp. The legal hemp industry is really exploding and booming. So take out your looking glass for me. And what kind of things do you foresee in the future? What kind of things do you think we can expect in the cannabis industry here in the next, 5 years or so?
I wish I, was really good at forecasting this stuff, because I would have picked the internet thing earlier and maybe some of the other trends. But I think, and I'm hearing this kind of across the board, we are at a sort of critical momentum right now. And actually, that's my word for the year, is momentum. And it's sort of the culmination of things that needed to happen. So we needed to have enough acceptance from the public. We had to have the pioneers, take those first shots, not happy, not comfortable, and certainly, a lot of them suffered along the way. But we had to have that. We had to have, a change in our current administration to really open up and enable, businesses to really think about this differently, and governments to think about it differently. Unfortunately, I think we needed the social unrest from last year in the ways that we did to really spotlight that social equity programs are important and necessary as part of this cannabis industry, so that we don't forget that. So I think all of these things sort of coming into play and starting to kind of work together in this sort of perfect storm, I think has created this net new ground that will be just something like we have never seen before. So, people talk about, the end of prohibition, the alcohol industry taking over and doing all these amazing things and, creating this. That's one type of product. Alcohol was a beverage, okay? And yes, you could get it in beer, wine, hard spirit, liquors, things, but it was still a beverage. It wasn't an edible. It wasn't a skin cream. It wasn't a topical pain relief, okay? It wasn't hemp-derived clothing and materials. It wasn't building materials. It wasn't hempcrete. It wasn't all of these things that we can now use this raw material for in literally every aisle of CVS or Rite Aid, pick a drugstore, will have hemp and or cannabis in it. Every single aisle, from toothpaste to beverages to tampons. I mean, it could have anything in that particular aisle. And to me, we've never seen anything like that. And so my crystal ball is get in right now and start figuring out where your cannabis journey is, whether it's the legal side of cannabis in a different state, or in certain states, it's hemp, which is legal now across all states. It could be international, it could be products, it could be materials, it could be software, it could be anything. Research, genetics.
Right. One of the things that I've always told people, because I've had a lot of people reach out to me about getting started in the cannabis industry, and that's kind of the number one piece of advice I've always given, is don't reinvent the wheel. You're good at something. Bring whatever it is that you're good at. Bring that skill set to the cannabis industry, and I can almost guarantee you there's a need for it because it is just so young, and there's a need for absolutely everything in this industry, regardless of what your specialty is. So that's absolutely one of the things that I encourage people to do is just really kind of evaluate their own skill set and determine what it is that they have that they can bring value to the industry and run with it. Chase it. That's what we're supposed to do with dreams, right? Is chase those things down.
Yeah, and I would say probably by the end of this year, we're going to see some major movements happening, on sort of the federal level. Different states are now joining in. There could be intrastate and interstate type agreements so that, California can produce for Oregon and vice versa. And, there's a lot of these things happening. And international, let's not forget the international markets. Those are popping up and running at light speed too. We could see Mexico legalizing cannabis. What does that do to the world, right? The cartel and all the things that have been happening for generations, it just literally changes everything almost overnight.
Most definitely. So just in closing, if you had to give one little piece of advice to, say, another woman that's watching this podcast and kind of on the fence about whether or not she wants to dip her toes in the cannabis industry, what would you say to her?
I'd say, first two things. One is join our women's network. Be part of the conversation. Learn from other women who have been in the space, who are, making a go of it, have already, taken that leap forward. But also do your research, right? There's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of different aspects to this industry, and find out where you fit best and where you're most comfortable, right? Some people don't want to take that big risk in working in a still federally illegal business. And maybe you're a great CPA. Join a CPA firm that works in the cannabis space, right? And start to learn about that, and then you can stand up your own practice. Or if you're in marketing, or if you're in ag tech, right? There's all these things and all these avenues available, but start doing some research and start aligning with yourself with others that are in that industry and learn.
Absolutely. So speaking of that, tell us how the listeners or how our audience today can get in touch with the Women's Inclusion Network or the Women Empowered in Cannabis. How can they get in touch with these groups or get in touch with you?
I would say probably the best thing is send an email, or, on our website we have different ways you can sign up and, join our, we have literally like twice a week programs going on and different things happening. And so, and they're free, so don't miss out. Join and get signed up on our lists and make sure you get access to all that content. And then the Women's Inclusion Network, we have a page right on our website. You can go ahead and sign up there. And at best case or worst case, info@arcviewgroup.com, and we'll get back to you and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you for coming on today for International Women's Day and for the rest of this month, which is so very important to highlight some of the cool things that women are doing in the cannabis industry and how much opportunity there really is here. So again, Kim, I can't thank you enough for taking a few minutes out of your day.
Oh, thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here with you. And thank you for doing this. And thank you for highlighting women in this industry. It's really important that we do that and that we are the mentors of this next generation coming up.
Absolutely. And thanks so much, Kim. It's been a joy.